Political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng joins us via video link to unpack the elections manifesto that have been launched by several political parties today. It includes the Freedom Front Plus, UDM and the PAC that is still ongoing. Asanda, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on the SABC at this hour.
Good afternoon and thank you for having me.
So as the PAC continues with its manifesto launch, let's go to the Freedom Front Plus. I just wanted to look at its offering and its relevance in South Africa, 30 years since its formation back in 1994, and what has come to the fore in terms of the ideas that they are presenting this time round.
Well, I think there's nothing new that they're bringing. It's the same talk about being against affirmative action and Black economic empowerment. It's the same conversation around basically trying to fight for the minority white people interests of South Africa. And of course, like all political parties, they're talking about corruption and the need to fight corruption and having an environment, an economic environment that is more conducive for job creation and is more business friendly, which again, they didn't detract from their usual utterances. I find, the Freedom Front Plus quite an interesting political party because they've never really gotten anything more than 2.2% in all the elections that they've run. So for the 30 years that they've been around, they've been like a minority of a minority party, but somehow they keep being able to survive because there are still those South Africans who somehow believe that white minority interests need to be protected despite the rampant, continuation of white privilege in South Africa, where white people still to this day are the most economically empowered people in South Africa, and they are the people who managed to continue to have the economic wealth that they made during apartheid. And we know, for example, that even Black economic empowerment deals actually seem to have enriched more white people than they have enriched Black people, as we've seen the data say.
Asanda, thank you for that context. Voter Vessels, its national spokesperson, saying that they are ready to be part of coalition governments. And just speaking to that 2.38% increase that they experienced as a party back in 2019's elections, the questions about whether this right-wing party can appeal and attract voters beyond its conservative base, beyond that 2.3%. What are you predicting or looking at come 2024?
Well, I think they're likely to retain their tiny percentage because there are those people who continue to be what's been referred to as better enders. That is the people who are firmly entrenched in the belief that they're going to fight for white minority rights and white privilege to continue to the end. And as I said, it's very fascinating to me as a South African that, you have people who continue to speak as if white people are under threat or their rights are under any threat, when we can see very clearly that they continue to have, the vast majority of the land. They continue to lead the business sector. And in fact, if you look at the JSE, it's still majority white owned. And so they're under no threat whatsoever. But somehow there are those who believe that they are under threat and they will go out there and they will continue to vote for the Freedom Front Plus and all of its, what I think is racist in essence, a lot of their policies, and they're very much against any action that seeks to redress the pains and the degradation of the past, particularly what happened during colonialism and during apartheid. They are big apartheid deniers, and we have even gone so far as to fight against diversity efforts at schools, at companies, and anywhere where they meet people who challenge the idea that white people are under threat in any way.
Turning our attention to the UDM, they of course launched their manifesto in Midrand today. Founded back in 1997, currently having 2 seats in Parliament, looking at their constituency, looking at their relevance, looking at their progress 30 years into democracy. What are you observing or expecting on that front with regards to them?
Well, the UDM is also a very interesting party because you'll remember that it comes out of the ANC. So in the early 90s, said Ramaphosa, my apologies. Bantu Holomisa was one of the first people to break away from the ANC post-democracy. And in fact, he was one of the first people to warn about corruption in the ANC and its potential to destroy South Africa, telling us as far back as the early 90s that he wasn't happy with corruption and the approach to corruption that the ANC had. And of course, we've seen, that his warnings were quite true in everything that has happened all the way to where we are now in the post-Zondo Commission state capture era. And of course, his manifesto focusing, as has become tradition for him, on corruption and the ways in which corruption needs to be dealt with. And he continues, although again very tiny percentage of the population that seem to vote for him, but his supporters are quite loyal, and they continue to show up at the polls and give him the 2 seats that he has, and he's likely to either retain those 2, or if things go bad, I think if he's lucky, he'll get 1 seat, because there are still people who supported him quite strongly, particularly in his stronghold, which is the Eastern Cape, where he used to be a former Homelands leader. So he has quite a big, base of support in the Eastern Cape, and those are the people that will continue to vote for him. And of course, perhaps some who are tired of the corruption of the ANC and want to have someone like Bantu Holomisa in Parliament to continue to challenge and to continue to question the ways in which the ANC deals with corruption.
And, outlining their focus on having that zero tolerance approach to corruption, promoting good governance as well. I wonder if that's going to mean anything for, in terms of prospects for them, given the juncture in our democracy, even coming out to say that they're willing to be working with other parties to form, a pact of sorts. How do you think those relations could also unfold?
Well, they're going to be a minority party, that's for sure. And so they don't actually have a choice but to collaborate with other bigger parties should they get any percentage of the vote, because these smaller parties that are literally, hanging on by a thread, their power comes from their potential kingmaker status. Because if a political party like the ANC, for instance, gets a 48 or 49%, all they need is just that 1 vote from someone like Bantu Holomisa in order to take them over the edge, over that 50%. And so that is where their power lies, in their small status, but its ability to become a powerful position, in a kingmaker position, should there be a need for a coalition government or government of national unity, as has been predicted by some to be what is likely to happen in South Africa post-2024.
Asanda, turning our attention now to the PAC, we heard its party president obviously addressing that it's still ongoing, happening in Soweto. The party saying it's returning to its roots. So we're looking at what is on offer, and he's also come out to say that they are entering these elections on a more united front. How would you score them?
Well, it's interesting to see that they finally managed to get the act together and contest the elections as one united body. That, I think, is important. I don't know, though, if they're going to be able to gain much by way of votes, because they've been out of it for almost too long, I would argue. And unfortunately for them, I think one of their biggest challenges is that EFF has taken a lot of their policies and ideological standings. And in fact, if you go back to their manifesto of 1959, which was supposed to be in competition to the manifesto that the ANC then released of the Freedom Charter, you'll see that a lot of what they're saying now still goes back to that 1959 charter, particularly around seeing themselves as a political party that's arguing for Pan-Africanism and African unity, and arguing for the interests of Black people, who are the majority in South Africa, being front and center rather than multiculturalism, which is what the ANC stands for. And we know that, in 1994, they lost that fight and people voted for the multiculturalism of the ANC. But I think, those who were former were former PAC supporters who haven't been brought into the fold of the EFF, they may be convinced perhaps to give them a vote, because maybe the EFF, they may be getting put off by the EFF's constant interruptions in parliament and some of the behavior of the EFF political party members when it comes to, how they dress and their love for branded goods while preaching, while preaching to the poor and working class South Africans. And so what you may find is those people who like the ideology of the original PAC, but had been voting for the EFF, may be coming back to the PAC, or it may be too late for the PAC. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, because you also have, 350 at this point who are said to be contesting the election. And so there's going to be a lot of choices and a lot of competition that they're going to have to beat. And that's going to be quite difficult considering they've been out of it for a while. But perhaps, people's memory, those of us who were still alive when the PAC was quite a force and actually competed quite strongly with the ANC, might be convinced perhaps to go vote for them. I don't know. It's still yet to be seen what exactly is going to happen, but it is an interesting addition to the political landscape. And we already saw that they were at the EFF's Manifesto launch, and they did say that they're willing to work with the EFF together with the ATM because they believe to be espousing the same ideologies.
Asanda, as we wrap up, the turnout in Soweto, and just also given what has transpired in the PAC's leadership, is it indicative of how capable they are to deliver on their promises? What are you observing just as we wrap up for the PAC?
Well, I mean, as I said, the PAC is in quite a tight spot because, they may have left their revival for far too late or for far too long. And so while it may seem like, they may be together as they've shown, in having all of their political party leaders, including those who took them to court, which kind of led to the breakdown of the party, present at the launch, it doesn't necessarily mean that that unity is going to last until the elections, or that people will be convinced. Because I don't know if I can trust a political party that couldn't get its act together just enough to be able to fight it out in the elections. And people don't have an appetite, I think, for political parties that are not stable and political parties that haven't shown themselves to be able to have the resistance to withstand internal issues in order to be able to duke it out at the national elections. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they manage at all to get enough votes for at least one seat, or if they are completely relegated to history.